All right, let's get an update now on cleanup operations after parts of even the Western Cape coastlines were affected by this storm surge, which brought on huge waves, washing away vehicles and flooding areas and homes. Blake Linder is the Knysna Plett Herald news editor, joins us for an update. Blake, thank you for making time for us this afternoon. What's the extent of the damage on infrastructure?
Good afternoon, Clement. Thank you very much for having me. The pleasure's all mine. With regards to the damage to infrastructure, it's quite widespread, and because of the nature of and the vastness thereof, it's very difficult for official organizations at this point to determine a rand value. But the extent is quite significant. It's the sort of estimates that everyone's sort of pulling out of air at the moment are going upwards of 10, maybe even more million rand, because you've got countless vehicles that have been damaged and washed away, and a vast number of houses as well. And due to the geographical location of the areas, quite a few of them are affluent areas, so the damage to the infrastructure is quite significant in rand value. But a lot of people are still doing their estimates and making sums and putting together the numbers and crunching the numbers. I just confirmed with the Garden Route District Municipality's disaster management manager, Gerard Otto. They are currently sitting in meetings with the Western Cape Provincial Disaster Management Centre, conducting assessments. So when it comes to assessing the damage and coming up with a concrete estimate, it's very much still on the go.
Yeah. Are there communities who live closer to the shores who have had to vacate their homes?
Yes, unfortunately. The only ones that we've received sort of reports from that anyone's had to evacuate was in Herald's Bay, just outside George. But that was, of course, during the weekend, and by now people have already begun returning to their homes because George Municipality has done a great job of cleaning up the mess and cleaning up the damage, so people can start returning to their homes safely by now.
My understanding is that in some parts of coastal areas, one person has died. We know of several injuries. What do you understand in terms of fatalities and injuries in your areas?
Yeah, so unfortunately there is news, as you say, of the 93-year-old lady in Wilderness who has passed away. She was in the car park at Knysna Beach in Wilderness, along with many other people. And unfortunately, she passed away en route to hospital. But that's the only report that we've received with regards to a fatality. As you say, there's been quite a few injuries. We know of someone who's in hospital in George, who's still undergoing treatment, who was in the same parking lot as the lady who passed away. So thankfully, it's only one, but unfortunately, it is one.
Yeah. And how are communities coming together in their efforts to, I suppose, clean up following this disaster?
Yeah, look, the community efforts have been incredible. I think that's one thing that really unites the Garden Route from head to toe, from Plett right down to Hesekwa. It's that in times of adversity, we always find it within ourselves to really stand together and come together to help one another. That's sort of the value, I guess, of living in small towns and such intimate areas where, if your neighbor is affected, then by virtue of just being a neighbor, you are affected too. So everyone's banded together really well and helped each other out where they can, whether it's transporting them, helping them evacuate, providing refuge or whatever it may be. The communal sense has been incredible.
Yeah, and one can only imagine how traumatizing this was for the communities affected. What's the feeling on the ground? I mean, how worried are the residents about even potential future occurrences?
Well, it is possible indeed, but it is worth mentioning that it's at least in the last 20 years, according to Gerard Otto, the Garden Route has not seen an occurrence like this, at least in the last 20 years. So it should be noted that while severe in nature, this is extremely rare. And for it to happen in this way, it's almost a freak of nature, with all the variables that came into play during the weekend, the new moon, spring high tide, and then of course the high winds, storm surge, and unfortunately it was just a massive devil's cocktail that everything sort of added up. And I won't say people are necessarily worried as yet, but they are, I would say, more acutely aware of nature and the volatility of nature and the ocean especially.
Yeah, and what's the relationship with the authorities? Were there early warnings and alerts about these high tide waves? And is there consistent communication now from the authorities?
Yes, absolutely. There has been very consistent and thorough communication, especially from local municipalities who've really kept residents informed. Leading up to, during the weekend rather, leading up to the storm surges, there was pre-warning from both the district municipality and from the South African Weather Service, which was carried down through the local municipalities too. So there was a fair amount of warning. But again, no one really expected it to happen to the extent that it did.
Yeah, and obviously this is usually a busy time for coastal provinces. I'm just wondering what impact this will have on tourism numbers, because people may just decide to avoid the beaches completely during the springtime.
Well, I think, Clement, I think at this time of year, I think it's more of a lull in seasonal patterns rather, sorry. Your busier times are more likely towards sort of November, towards going into January. And maybe in the winter months, in Knysna, especially with the Knysna Oyster Festival and that kind of thing. But if ever there was a time for it to happen, it's better that it happened now, because now it's a bit of a lull in terms of tourism numbers. But I won't say that anyone would be scared. I think we've seen that the garden route in the face of adversity can still provide world-class services and availability for people who do come visit, no matter what has happened. As is evidenced by the Knysna fires 6 years ago, the region bounced back, and I think the same can be said for the entirety of the garden route in what's gonna come now after this, what's happened this past weekend.
Yeah, Blake Linder, appreciate your time on Newsfeed PM this afternoon. He is the Knysna Plett Herald news editor.